Oh, and happy Thursday, January the 18th. I'm Brian Colin, Creature Curator, and I'm here to talk all about My World Revelo and the book that I currently have on Kickstarter, my Creature Collection, Volume 1. Please, if at any time you have any questions about my sculpting, the stories that are being come up with for the world, or anything like that, please feel free to post them in the chat because I'm more than happy to share any knowledge, including information on materials, sculpting techniques, all that good stuff. So, all right. Hopefully you can hear me A-okay. Fantastic. And it is on Facebook, I believe. I'm going to have to see if I can pull that up just in case any chat starts going on in the Facebook room. So stand by one moment and let me pull that up in a separate window. Is everybody having a lovely evening? All right, well, no, it's not coming up in the Facebook feed, so that's okay. So for my Creature Collection Volume 1, it is a hardbound book that breaks My World Revelo down by regions. See, I created this world. I started on it just over 8 years ago, right before my son Wyatt was born. And I wanted to build a world that we could collaborate on together. Right on. Thank you, Alan. It's on Facebook? All right. Very cool. And I'll have to maybe if you're in, Alan, if you don't mind popping it into this chat, if you see a question, that would be awesome. Just so I'm not fooling around trying to figure out where that is. So My World Revelo, I decided to build right before my son Wyatt was about to be born, because I wanted to create a world that we could collaborate on together. And he's almost 8 now. So Revelo itself is Oliver backwards, and that is his middle name, because Wyatt backwards just sounds weird. And when I was a kid, I would always spell my name backwards. So I'd always go around like my alter ego was Nerb Nella Nilak, my Brian Allen Colin. So with that, flipping his name backwards, it just seemed like a natural way to go with things. Right now, there's 12 regions in the giant landmass that is Revelo. We have the Fiery Pits, which is the volcanic region. And that was when I started drawing my first rough idea of the map about 3 years ago, when my son was 5. I was like, what would you like in here? And he's like, volcanoes. And so I drew volcanoes in, and that became the Fiery Pits. And since creating the Fiery Pits, almost all the species that have been developed for that region have been his ideas. So the very first, I was like, well, now that we know that there's this region, what do you want the first creature to be? And so he was like, a lizard man. So I drew a lizard man, and I have a flat painting of what that species, the Bernadazzi, is, and the full body, or the sculpture of his chest up to his head, is photographed and in the book, as well as that illustration, and more backstory on the Bernadazzi themselves. But so that was the very first species that he decided that he wanted to come up with to be in the world. Since then, I was at a convention last Father's Day, and on Father's Day, he drew a fire turtle for me, as that would be in the Fiery Pits. And I then sculpted it, and that's in there. If you look at further down on the Kickstarter page, you will see his illustration, and that was the inspiration for the sculpture that's in there. And then also that illustration itself that he did, I was lucky enough to have in a 2-person gallery show with me this past year. It was great to see his concept art next to my sculpture with the map of the world, and how he has influenced it. Now, the creation of Revelo and this book that I've done is not just 2 people in my family. Right now, it's 3 of us, and hopefully we'll be 4. My wife, Carrie, also has originally started out editing the book, because I love having ideas. I love world building. I love coming up with all the different bits and pieces and species and characters and overarching themes that are going on. But when it comes down to the writing, I write it, but it's really needs to be fine-tuned and tweaked. And if I write something 3 years ago and something now, sometimes have to make sure that everything stays in a cohesive storyline. So Carrie's come back in, not only tweaked it, but then also rewritten and now adding a lot more and developing the world out even more than what I've done. So it's a real family collaborative project. And our daughter Ruby, who just turned 4, another year or two, she'll be adding to it as well. And she's going to have her own world, or not her own world, her own continent to the world as well. So again, this is, you're able to ask me anything about the world. I'm just talking about things in the setting until I have some questions, but feel free at any point to chime in on the chat, interrupt, and ask away. So let's see. So some of the things with the world, I talked a bit about the fiery pits. Some of the other species that are in there, I talked about the Chelinid, which is the fire turtle, the Bernadazzi. There are also the Basilites, which are these kind of rocky creatures that have lava flowing over them, and they almost leave a slug trail behind them, glistening and shimmering on the ground. What are the main regions of Revelo? Oh, and are they all in the book? Yes. So I started with the fiery pits. Then as you move down the western coastline, there is Merk's Hollow, which used to be Crookstooth. It is the largest city in Revelo that was recently overthrown by Outlanders, a species from a distant land that have recently been inhabiting Revelo as their ships have been wrecked as they're coming in off the coast. I consider Merk's Hollow a region because it's almost like its own city-state. Then southwest of that, there is the Perilous Peaks, which throughout both the mountains and the cavernous system underneath, there are a ton of species and characters and stories that are happening within the different societies that interact there. Almost all of my creatures, well, not all of them, but like about 80% of the creatures that I've created so far are all intelligent, sapient beings. So there's a lot of different stories that are going on with those. Now, I don't necessarily tell all of those stories because I come from a role-playing game background where a lot of people would set the stage for the story and then allow other people to play and build their own stories upon what was created, which is something I hope to do with Revelo itself. I want other people to be able to come in, take bits and pieces, and be able to weave their own tales within my world. But as we go down the Perilous Peaks, then as you come inland, there is the Badlands, where it's very desolate, and most of the species that live there are not very kind and have to have a hard time surviving and tend to be a little more war-oriented. The map itself, I will get back to the rest of the regions in just a moment, but the map itself was just done by Jared Blando, who makes amazing maps. And I'm hoping to post that as an update to Facebook in the next day or so, because there's a work in progress map on the, and I meant to Kickstarter. There is a work in progress map currently on the Kickstarter page, but with the rest of it really done up, it looks beautiful, and it's going to look fantastic inside the book. As you travel up from the Badlands, if you go slightly east, you will veer into the Salts, which is a beachy tropical region that also then has a little island off into the water a bit. And just north of that is a big circular forest where there is no life anymore, for that is the Forest of the Dead. In the very beginning of the book, in the first couple of pages, I talk about the history of Revelo and how the world was created from the first god to her children, her sister, her sister's child, the battles that ensued, how power was won and lost, and how certain things happened within Revelo itself. And one of the gods was trapped in this circular forest and ended up sucking all of the life out of it, creating the Forest of the Dead. So almost everything within that forest is unliving, like my take on zombies or undead. But there are also certain species that manage to avoid the unliving and outwit them, if you will. And in the center of that circular forest is the Valley of Despair. For it was not always called the Valley of Despair, but because for so many years, the species and characters that were trapped inside of this valley because they could not travel through the Forest of the Dead, the inside started to wither and deplenish until they could finally figure out a way to get out. I've covered a lot of the regions, but that's not quite all of it. I'm looking at this book cover. Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate it. I do have over 50 species, and no, they're not all in the book. The book is going to be, right now it's at 120 pages with a stretch goal is going to be 144. That doesn't quite allow for all the species that I've created at this point. I believe I have about 30 some odd species in the book. I also have a couple of magical items or relics from my land, like the Hammer of Grunthar would be one of the magic items. A couple other items. I think even one that you may own, Alan. Hey, Dino. Yes, I need that 144 because I have pages right now where it's got story, illustration, large photo, but some of the creatures really deserve like a 2-page spread with a larger photo, just for some of the details of the sculpture, to show off a lot of the photography of Keith May, who photographed a large portion of the creatures. So I'm really pushing for those extra pages. And also, if I don't put all 50 species in, that makes it sooner that I can do a volume 2, because I did call this Revelo Creature Collection Volume 1. I would like to expand upon this and do another one in the near future. Year, 2 years, depending on how things go and how everything else pans out. So still in the world, there's also the Waiju Desert, which is pretty barren on top, but then down below, there are giant tunnels that have been carved out by these gigantic sandworms who have tunneled through, creating these tunnels. And there's almost like mole people that are tinkerers, and almost if you think steampunk, everything that they create is powered on the methane that comes from the excrement of these giant sandworms. And they've built the most elaborate, intricate cities in Revelo. They're the greatest inventors on this world, and they've created a really awesome system. And so, thank you, Dino. And so that's the Waiju. Then over on the far eastern side, there is the Icy Divide, which is a long, mountainous, icy region. It has caverns and tunnels inside of it, as well as some species living on the mountainside as well, but not as many because of how cold the temperatures get. Then as we move down a little bit further south, there's the marshland, which is on the easternmost side of the salts, and then also the floating forest. And the floating forest is like a giant landmass that has been ripped up out of the ground into the air, with the roots dangling down below, species living above in the treetops and the ground floor, and then also other species living down in the roots as well. So I know I've talked a good bit about the book that's part of this Kickstarter, but one of the other things is and a huge benefit is that I have Norse Publishing, who is Norse Foundry, that's actually producing the book and the coins that are going along with this. They do metal gaming supplies, metal dice, metal coins, and they do an exquisite job at it. And I have been thrilled at the idea of having currency for Revelo, coins that I could just have illustrations of some of the creatures that I've created on them, and then also have that work into the storyline and into the gaming aspect as being real coins that are real physical, tangible coins. I've seen the digital proof of one of the coins that has an illustration of Cockathralis, and that is it was Camilla who has it was almost my take on a cockatrice with a beak and these big porcupine type quills going out the top of its head. And I've seen the digital proof on that, and I cannot wait to get the physical sample, because they are going to look fantastic. So that is overall the regions of the area. Does anybody have any questions at this point? As I take a little swig of coffee to keep my pep in my step. as if any of you know my voice, it is a little broken up from getting over a cold at the moment. So we're doing really well with the Kickstarter, especially at 2 days in. Thank you, Dino. Yes, and a big thanks to you. I really appreciate all of your support. Halfway there, hitting the halfway mark, like before I got up this morning, was fantastic. And I know we're just going to keep pushing through, and I think that it's going to do. Thank you. I think it's really going to do well, and I can't wait to get to the 144 page mark. And I really want to unlock a map, because when I was younger, one of the things that I loved, especially when getting like old D&D box sets, was opening it up and pulling out the map that you could unfold and then have giant maps of whatever the world or region was. So I'm trying to think. So when you first open up the book, we're going to, well, actually, before I get into that, some of the other things that are going on in the book and some of the things that are going on in the world that are more of the overarching themes of the issues that are going on. There is an order called the Keeper of Secrets, and there are 18 of those at any given time. The Keepers of Secrets, when the main god Credona and her sister Girma got into a giant battle, part of Girma's arm was shattered into 18 fragments. And these fragments, Credona then put into individual creatures in Revelo. And as these fragments were absorbed, they held secrets. And it's almost like these Keepers of Secrets are like a traveling monk or cleric or priest type being that will go around and almost absolve you of the secrets that you have. But then that stays inside that fragment. And as one keeper passes away, that fragment is then passed on to another. But there is a sect within the community that are called the Truth Seekers that believe that if all those fragments are reunited, they will be able to bring their god back. So there is a band of Truth Seekers that is out currently hunting the Keepers of Secrets. And that's one of the main overarching stories that's going on. There's also I talked about the Forest of the Dead. One of the gods, the Veil, that is trapped there magically, as she has been creating these unliving creatures to go and bring life to her, to feed her. The magic in that area that's keeping the unliving trapped in has been starting to wear thin. And so the unliving have slowly been trickling out at night into the areas that they haven't been able to get to before. And this magic, though it doesn't really have a name, it is the force that, not the force like Star Wars, but it's magical force that comes from the gods. So a lot of times a specific character may pray to or believe in one god and be able to pull that god's energy and power. So if somebody worshipped the Emberson, which is the god of fire and heat and passion, they would often be able to control, like create fireball type things, or control fire if it was there, move lava if they were in the fiery pits. Or if someone was a worshiper of Corsavine, that is the god of air, might be able to create big tornadoes or whirlwinds, or push things along with the air and make things like that. So it's kind of element-based magic, determined by the god or gods that particular character tends to believe in, or give their faith to. So, and as a lot of the magic is starting to kind of drain from certain things, especially magic that has been cast on an area that's been holding something in, almost as if imprisoned for a certain length of time, as that magic starts to fade, it's allowing other things to kind of trickle out and seep through. Those are two of the big story arcs that are going on. There's also been a huge surge of gray scrolls that have been going along, moving northeast, and maybe teaming up with the Outlanders. So that's kind of some of the story stuff that's going on. Then, if you notice behind me, I also have some sculptures going right behind me. A lot of these all of these sculptures are actually in the book. All of these are one-of-a-kind hand-sculpted pieces. Uh, I start with a styrofoam base. I add on top of them with a two-part air drying epoxy called Magic Sculpt that I mix part A and B together. And when they mix, they start the curing process. And as the curing starts to happen, I spray it with water to smooth it. I get the details in. And then I paint them with little teeny tiny miniature paints by Reaper Mini. And I paint all those up just with dry brushing techniques. And I create the eyes on the computer. I print those out. Then I touch those up with watercolor and glue those to a glass dome and encapsulate those down into the sculpted material. Some of them, like this, I actually included real seashells into the sculpting process that I then reinforced on the back with Gorilla Glue to give it a nice reinforcement. Let's see. Certain other things like the hammer itself, the hammer of Grunthar, that was something that I had a base for, and then I just modified on top of that. This is a Diablo rock. For not all of the beasts that I make are chopped off at the head. Now there is a pledge level that there's 2 out of 3 left where you would actually get to collaborate with me on a creature that would get put into the book. We would talk about the overall idea of what it would look like. I would do 2 concept sketches. We would talk back and forth about that. I would then sculpt it, paint it. We'd collaborate on ideas for the story. I'd work the story in, and then from there, you would get the sculpture at the end of the campaign after I took photographs of it and it was in the book. And so you would actually have collaborated and added to the world of Revelo. Yes, I totally make the eyes. So years ago when I first started, I didn't make the eyes. I used to buy them from a taxidermy shop, and then then all of them were just starting to look a little too real and a little too normal. So then I started wanting to play with different colors and different sizes. And so then I realized that I could figure out how to make them. And though they don't have quite the concave look, if you look at them from all angles that really nice taxidermy ones do, these do a really good job at tricking the eye when looking at them. Why can't you get a hat? You can totally get a hat. All you have to do is go to my website and order one. If I bought them in bulk, then it'd be different. But they're a one-off where you order it, you click the buy button, it goes to the fulfillment center, they embroider it, and then they mail it out for me. Yes, Dino has a hat. It would be awesome. It'll be awesome seeing it. And Tim does as well. Excellent. I bet that hopefully I will see you at a convention this year. The Spectrum not happening is a bit of a shame, but I'm glad that I'm getting to go to a LuxCon, although I know that's it's got to be a good bit further of a hike. Oh, and so I just added a new, yes, Origins will be wonderful. I'm very excited about Origins. Excellent. Very good. Well, definitely, if you're coming to Atlanta, let me know. I just added MegaCon to my list of shows that I will be doing this year. I was talking with Drew of Norse Foundry, and I will be joining him at his booth this year. We'll be helping to man it, and then I will also have some of my critters there with me as well. I probably will not have my full assortment, but it will be a decent amount to show more of what's going on. Well, thank you, Alan. I hope you have a good evening, and I will talk to you soon. And so, does anybody have any questions about anything so far with Revelo? Or anything for that matter? Other islands, continents. Oh, okay. So, there will be a continent named for my daughter Ruby. It's going to be something, most likely something along the something to deal with Savage, because that was almost her middle name. But so I haven't quite figured that out exactly, because there's Savage Lands in X-Men, Savage World, Savage Kingdom. There's a whole bunch of that. So Carrie and I have been bouncing around a couple ideas about that, but I have a feeling that'll probably be maybe two or 3 years out from now, maybe sooner. Just kind of depends on how the bigger story picture goes and how certain things start to come together. Because a lot of the way I write the story is I let things start to kind of come together on their own. I don't try and think about the story from start to finish and everything in between. I just kind of let it build upon itself, because I feel like it takes a more natural, organic path. And I think it's worked well so far. But I've also been building this world out slowly for a number of years, and now as it's beginning to snowball, a lot more is starting to happen. So I need to make sure everything stays in line as we continue to move forward. Sea creatures, ship floating communities. So the waters around Revelo, the depths unknown, have almost like a constant moving, super strong current that just goes around and around, and it only slows up right at one point where the water comes in, the waterways come into Merk's Hollow. A lot of the inhabitants of Revelo believe that's from Anagoskal, the water god, but there's no real true scientific definition in any of the history books as to what it is. So that's why, like, these Outlanders have come in, but they have not been able to get back out. There are rumors of sea creatures out in the depths, but nothing that's been really captured or documented fully. There are sea creatures that live down in the salts, which is more of the beachy tropical region. And there will be about three or four species in there. And one of them is a little more, one of them I think I'm going to build out more after this book to dig a little deeper into their community, but that'll probably be in almost like a year 2 version or a season 2 version of the Revelo. This will all be Age of Discovery. And as 6 months from now, when I do the role-playing game setting and I go into a little more detail about that stuff, that will be like season 1. Then the year after that will be kind of season 2. Thank you, Dino. It's so exciting to be doing this, and it's great to have people on board and excited and interested in it as well. And just as the stories evolve and the characters keep developing, it's so fun to see how they all tend to work together and build upon each other. And I have scheduled to do another one of these Kickstarter live streams a week from tonight, except it'll be at 8:30 Eastern instead of 8 o'clock. And I need to figure out how to stream it to Facebook as well to try and grab a few more folks in so that more people will notice and be able to ask questions about it. Anybody have any other questions? I'm just continuing to get over this head cold that I've had for the past couple. Oh, there's the Facebook Live. That's crazy. All right. I'm going to go ahead and click to add this to Facebook Live and see if anybody will see if it'll jump in. Let's see. Choose where I'm going to post. Share on my timeline, or share on a page I manage. I'm going to share on my timeline. So I may end up rehashing a lot of what I've already said, just if all of a sudden it seems like there is going to be, see if there's, in case there's going to be more folks involved. stand by for just 1 second as I go ahead and do this. Add a title. All right, sorry about that. And that is now streaming to Facebook. And I should probably open up a new window just in case somebody wants to post comments in the chat there. And all right, so oops, there we go. All right, thank you. Thank you for your patience in that one. If I could just figure out how to see comments in here and mute that. There we go. Awesome. So if anybody is watching from Facebook, I have been streaming live on Kickstarter for about 30 minutes and just finally realized that I could actually stream on Facebook as well at the same time. I'm talking about my Revelo Creature Collection Volume 1, my book that is on Kickstarter. It's been on for almost 2 days now, and we've hit over 50%, which has been fantastic. I've had a lot of great support from a lot of the folks that are familiar with my sculptures and the world that I've been creating. Thank you, Dino, for sharing that. Hello, Drew and Greg, for joining the Facebook Live. Thank you for tuning in. So I've talked a little bit already, and so since there's only Dino, I'm sorry, and there's 2 other folks that look like they are in the Kickstarter chat, I'm going to probably do some reruns right now and talk about it again because I have not, as I'm trying to reach out to more folks. So yesterday morning at 5 a.m., I launched my Kickstarter for my book, which has been awesome. Now, my creature collection is a bestiary style art book. It's I grew up playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, enjoying a lot of monster manual type books and being able to flip through things like that. And thank you, Drew. And by having that in my childhood, the idea of creating a book where you can see the pictures and the illustrations and the stories that go with it really is something that resonates with me. And especially my son Wyatt, I started reading him the monster manual for D&D around 4 or 5. Not really reading it, but just kind of going over some light notes and showing him some pictures and making up some stories to go with it as well. And so this creature collection, it is not game specific at all. It's more, I wanted everybody to be able to enjoy it. Now, I do have a stretch goal towards the end of the campaign where it will be creating stats for my species that I've created so far for like 5e, Pathfinder, and Fate. But I wanted to keep this as something that lots of folks could enjoy. The book itself, first it goes into the history of Revelo, this world that is was named after my son. His middle name is Oliver, and if you take his middle name and flip it backwards, that is Revelo. The reason I did that was I wanted to create a name that sounded unique, that was tied directly to him. And also when I was a kid, I would, as a secret code name, I would call myself Nerb Nella Nilok, which is Brian Allen Colon backwards. So I figured if that worked for me as a kid, it would totally work for him as a kid as well. So that being said, the world itself, once you're inside and you start reading the history, it talks about how the world was created, how the gods were created, how they've created all the species, how they battled, how they're in hibernation now. And then from there, it goes into the current age, which is the age of discovery. Within that age, it now then breaks down the regions of the world. And the regions themselves, there are 12 regions within Revelo. And it breaks down a little, tells a story about the region, and then some of the species that are currently there. It has photos, full-bodied illustrations, and then the story to go with them. Uh, I have come up with the initial ideas for the stories. I've done a first draft, and then my wife Carrie has gone in. And at first, she was just editing them, and then from there, she really went into a lot of depth and detail, rewriting and reworking the stories so that it could really have a lot more life to it. Because I'm really good at coming up with the ideas and the overall concepts, but she is a far better writer. And when she started writing it, it's great that she's involved on that level. And then Wyatt, who's now 8, has created regions in the world. He's helped with the Pantheon of Gods. The fiery pits themselves were his idea, as well as I think almost every species that is inside the fiery pits in this book were his idea in one form or another. Hey, Jonathan, thanks for joining. If anybody in the chat and Facebook or in Kickstarter wants to throw in any questions, please do not hesitate. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about the campaign, about the book, the world, so forth and so on. So I was mentioning just a little bit earlier that when my son Wyatt first created the fiery pits, when I was drawing the initial concept of the map, and I was like, what do you want to be in here? And he's like, I want volcanoes. So we put in the fiery pits. I asked him what he wanted the first creature from the world, from that region to be. And he said a lizard man. So then I drew what is now known as a Bernadazzi, which is the lizard men type species from the fiery pits. Once I drew that and he gave his okay, I then went ahead and sculpted the bust of that beast, and that is now hanging in a gaming tavern in Ontario. And so then from there, he has also created a bunch of other ideas for species that live in that region. He did one while I was at a convention of a fire turtle that he did the drawing, and then I took that and did the sculpture for it. And he's added ideas about what some of the gods would be like, how some of them hibernate. And it's been a really good collaborative effort with world building and trying to get that sort of geeky habits in at an early age. And because I do have that background in role-playing games, I feel like that really adds to continuing to build out the species and the characters that inhabit the world. With inside the book are, right now, there's about 35 species, as well as about 4 or 5 magic items as well. The sculptures are photographed. Each of these are one-of-a-kind sculptures that I start with a styrofoam base. I sculpt on. Do you wish you could talk? Yes, that would be awesome to be able to talk to Jim Henson. Well, thank you, Jonathan. That's awesome. So if anybody is in the Kickstarter window, I'm sorry, I will read this. Do you wish you could talk to Jim Henson? Me too. Brian, I truly believe is what talking to a young Jim Henson working on the Dark Crystal or Labyrinth would be like. Give a listen. His creatures and sculptures are amazing, and he's releasing his first bestiary on Kickstarter now. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So, yeah, that would be awesome to be able to talk to him. And I feel like there's a certain whimsiness to Henson's work that I try. Between Jim Henson and Dr. Seuss, there's something whimsical that you need to have in pieces when there isn't necessarily a full sense of familiarity, so that it doesn't come across as scary or creepy. Because adults have more of a tendency and habit to get a little more intimidated by some of the creatures than children do. But when you add a little more whimsy, especially like one of my favorite newer pieces actually my favorite recent piece that I've done lately is this guy. And the reason for that, I think, is because it has something about its face, definitely has a little more whimsy to it. And also the color palette is completely different than what I tend to do currently. So it's nice having something just a good bit different than what I usually do. Again, if anyone has any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. So the book is getting so much closer to being backed. If anybody has any interest, there is if you look anywhere on any of my social feeds, there are links to the Kickstarter campaign. Actually, and now it's in the chat. So the Kickstarter that I'm running, it ends in about 19 and a half days. I'm trying to raise enough money to go to press with my art book, which is currently set at 120 pages, with the goal of pushing it past 120 pages and getting 144, because I really feel like the book deserves that much more content to it. As I said, it has the world broken down by regions and a lot of the species that I've come up with so far, and some of the underlying story that's going on. And if anybody's watching that is into role-playing games as well, from this point, this is an art book that kind of lays the foundation for 6 months from now when I do a separate book that's for a role-playing game setting, so anybody can start to build and tell stories set in my world. Hey, Linda, thank you. That's awesome. I hope you're doing well today. So I want to build out a strong enough world that other people can tell stories, but not tie down the storyline so much that people can explore and have their own creativity and imagination as well. And some of the bigger themes that are currently going on within the story, one of the things that you might find through a lot of my pieces are a lot of them will have little locks in their chests, and that is symbolic of the Keepers of Secrets, which are a group of 18 creatures that have been given this fragment of one of the gods and placed inside them that is able to actually keep secrets that are given to them as people need to get them off their chest and almost absolve them of their of the secrets that they have given. Excuse me for just a moment. So again, if anybody has any questions about the book or what is in it or the sculptures themselves, please let me know. I will be doing this again in Hey, Atticus, how are you? If you're in the Facebook chat, over on the Kickstarter side, I've got Atticus saying he picked up a Salzrite at Gen Con. He really loves what it brings to his gaming space, excited about the Kickstarter. Thank you, Atticus. I really appreciate that. It was awesome that you were able to actually pick it up directly at Gen Con. That was great. Morgan, over on the Facebook side, are there any human-like creatures in Revelo? And it appears somewhere massive bone. What is this? Awesome. Well, hey, Morgan, glad that you are in the chat. And thank you, as always, for the support. There are not really, there's humanoid creatures, but none that are like full-on elves or humans. I'm trying, at the current moment, I'm working on sketch concepts for what the Outlanders are going to be. And Outlanders are a species that have come in from a different land that have, in the past 25-ish years, been they keep getting shipwrecked on Revelo. And they've started to take over some of the towns and some of the societies. And I've got a stack of sketches that are actually going out in the mail tomorrow. And I believe you'll be getting one of them, Morgan, because the Patreon backers that get the sketches, I've been working out ideas on what these humanoid creatures are going to look like. But I haven't quite decided exactly what it's going to be. None of them are exactly human, and none of them are really elf-like, but they have similar characteristics. For the bone masks, there's a species called grinatars, which live in the forest of the dead. I could see that as well, Carrie, that there could be a more human-like species in the Savage Land area. But the masks were originally discovered by the grinatars, who live in the forest of the dead, that they realized when they wore a bone mask on their face, they could trick the unliving that were in the forest into not realizing that they were still alive. So as long as they were quiet, they could sneak around and not get noticed and still manage to live within the forest of the dead. And so the forest of the dead and the history of that area and how the life was drained out of it, how the god, the Veil, got trapped in there, locked in with magic, and how she now gets other beings to bring lives to her so that she can suck down their life force. That's all described in the book. I think you'll like that part of it. Yes, so the symbiotic. The very first creature that I made. Oh, so anybody that is on the Kickstarter side, Dino noticed a lot of creatures appear to be symbiotic. Behind any story behind that? So yes, the very first creature in this world that I created was a Reaper. And there's a bunch of different variations of Reapers, but they were the first species that were created on this world by the gods that were not gods. And from that, as they split off to the different regions of Revelo, they've evolved slightly differently. There's one that's very blue in color, and it will be in the book. That was the first one, and he has a big face down on his chest and the kind of deer-like head up top. And I sculpted that while Carrie was pregnant with Wyatt, and at the time we were watching a bunch of like TV shows like Monsters Inside Me, where it was like people going into lakes and then getting these parasites, and the ideas of parasites living in you while you're carrying on, and the idea that there was another human body that was essentially a parasite at the same time is what started me down the path of making the multiple heads in one creature and the multiple minds in one creature, and how they have to balance out. And then at the same time, when I first started that, I was also struggling with the idea of working full time and arting as much as I could, and how the two brains they both need to achieve the same thing, but they're both fighting each other for what's important. Hey, Carlos, thanks for joining in. Until you said no more of that show. Yeah, I really, at one point, I'd seen enough Monsters Inside Me show that I was like, all right, I'm not going to go out into public places anymore. I don't need to get weird parasites and stuff. So I finally had to stop watching. It got to a point that it was just a little too much. So other things that are in the... Hey, how are things going with you, Carlos? It feels like it has been the ages. I'm here talking about my Creature Collection Volume 1 book, streaming here and on the Kickstarter. As you all can probably see, there are some of the creatures behind me. The Struthia lives in the salts. A coral Reaper as well lives in the salts, as its coloration seems it lends itself to the tropical colors that are in that region. This guy over here lives in the Badlands, which is a very desolate region of the world. And then these live atop mostly atop the floating forest. They have like a wing-ish membrane underneath their arms that allows them to glide from high up in the treetops. And then they also end up being trained by other more intelligent species and ridden on. But there's lots about each of these species, stories behind them, illustrations in the book as well. But I'm going to do, if anyone has any more questions, I'm going to be wrapping it up here shortly. Do I have a favorite region so far? I don't. I don't have a favorite. They're all my babies. I think I'll end up probably liking the Perilous Peaks the best, because that's the one that I spent the most amount of time in as we first started creating species and characters. Like, that's where the Carcathians were from, and Doralt the Carcathian was probably one of my favorites at first, and still has a good spot in my heart for that guy. Just something about him, all the horns. How can you spread the word? Anything that you can do to share it with other folks that you think might be interested in it would be great. I really appreciate that. If maybe at your local gaming or comic shops, especially if they know that this is the foundation for what's going to be a role-playing game setting later. And also, I know I haven't talked about it much because I've mainly teased about the idea, but I will be in May and June. I will be with Norse Foundry releasing 2 gaming supplements. They're almost like accessories, but they are they will be fully contained gaming modules that can be used. There will be a printed element, and then there will also be a PDF download element where you'll be able to select 5e, Pathfinder, or Fate. It will have stats for 5 of my species in each one. There will be magic items in each one, and that's the first 2 out of a series of what will probably be 6 within 2018. The first one will be for the Fiery Pits. The second one will be for the Icy Divide. And we also already have pre-orders from a role-playing game mailing service, so I know that they're going to be in front of people. So it'd be awesome if people have an inkling of what Revlo is before this stuff goes out. But if not, they will slowly get inducted into the world, I think, after that. And also then with the Fate book being kickstarted probably about halfway through the year. So anything you can do to just spread it around. I will also, if you know of a comic or gaming shop that, if you know of a comic or gaming shop, and Norse Foundry on the Kickstarter said spoilers, if you know of a comic or gaming shop that is not on Norse Foundry's mailing list, have them reach out to Norse, because I'm working on a email. I'm probably working on an email tomorrow that they will send out to retailers about the retailer bundles that I have going on through Kickstarter, because I currently offer 5 books at half price for retailers, and I'm planning on putting in other things in there, like if you're within a certain number of hours of where I am in Georgia, then if you buy at least X amount of dollars, I'd be willing to travel to go and do a signing there once the book is actually out. So, or, Morgan, you are in, I know where you are, and you aren't too far from where some of my family is. So I could make an exception if I could go and see family as well, if there was a signing that needed to be done at a store near you. So anything that can be done like that to just try and help retailers get involved as well would be great, because that will quickly get it in front of more people. But Dino, you asked about a printable flyer. Once I figure out the email, I'll design a printable one. If anyone has an interest in like a PDF of that, just send me a note, and I will make sure that I email one to you. Or I will put one on the Creature Curation Facebook page, and I will also see about adding one to the Kickstarter page as well. I'll make a PDF sell sheet for that. those are great ideas. Anybody have any other thoughts or questions? Go ahead. Because I'm about to wrap up here. So upcoming appearances that I will be doing. I will be having another one of these a week from today, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. This one I started at 8 on Kickstarter and 8:30 on Facebook. Next time I'll make sure I start it on Facebook at the exact same time. Then also next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be on the video YouTube podcast One Fantastic Week. That is a weekly show where they talk about artists and fantasy art with other fantasy artists. So it should be a lot of talk about the business side of things, and it should be a lot of fun. I've been watching them for a little over a year now, right after not this Gen Con, but the previous Gen Con when I first found out about them, and I've been watching them almost religiously every week because I always glean a little bit of knowledge out of each episode because everybody has different experiences from working in this industry, and it's always a good time. So hopefully there will be some new stories that I'm able to share with folks about the conventions I do and the art that I make. Well, if no one has any questions, then I am going to call it a night. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. And thank you for everyone that supported me. And be sure to, I'll put it in the chat one more time. It is cant.rip/book for the short URL. And if you know what cantrip is, that is a low-level spell in D&D. And so that's why I bought the cant.rip URL so that I could make funny little short URLs out of that. And why it says hi to everybody, because he is one of the creators of Revelo. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope to see you again soon.